Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Asio Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by Asio Gear. Don, the time has finally come. We are almost at hunting season, and you're going to give your big buck forecast, or technically just buck forecast, for this year in this episode. We haven't hyped this up, but we're going to touch on that this episode.
Yeah, so it's Labor Day weekend as we're recording this, and I actually went and checked several cameras today in preparation for this recording, just to kind of I'd already had my mind made up what I think this season's going to be like, but just to confirm, checked a bunch of cameras today, so we've got plenty to talk about there.
Yeah, we're going to do that at the second segment right after the Asio spot, but first let's talk about you checking cameras. I just literally walked in the door from Illinois getting stuff ready for season up there, and I start Kentucky archery season here this week. By the time people are listening to this, the first Saturday in September, we will be open in the state of Kentucky.
Well, not so lucky here in Illinois. We got to wait till the 1st of October. So, have you ever killed a velvet buck?
I have not. I've shot multiple bucks opening weekend. The closest I had is I shot a buck on, I think, like September 16th that he had velvet still hanging, but was not still in velvet. It's not like our buddy Brandon Epperson, who seems to kill one every month.
Well, on the cameras I checked, I've only seen one buck that has shed velvet so far, which is about typical. I mean, we're still last day of August as we record this, but it won't be long. They'll all be shed, and yep. October will be here, and away we go.
I don't have anything against killing a velvet buck, but my target buck that I was hunting was never in velvet when I saw it. So it's not that I'm against it. I don't have this desire to kill one in velvet, but if it's my target buck and he's in velvet, I don't mind it. But I know a lot of guys, it's just a goal of theirs to be able to kill a velvet buck. I'm more about which buck than I am which stage it is. So I've never had that, kind of desire to kill one in velvet, but if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, when I was younger, I wanted to kill a velvet buck, but I lost that desire, probably 20 years ago, maybe longer than that.
What states are even possible? Tennessee's open, South Carolina's open, Kentucky, North Dakota. Kansas has an early season, I think. Do they have an early archery?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. I know there's a couple states up north, but I've seen on Facebook already there's been some good bucks killed in Tennessee. And of course, Joe's already hunting down in South Carolina. So I know there's more than just a couple states where you can do it. But I don't know. As of right now, I don't expect there to be. I'm kind of going to wait till the rut and late season on my farm. I have mulched so much old bedding area on my farm. I don't have a real big bachelor group on it like I used to before this remodel. So I think it's going to take a couple years to settle in. But I tell you what I am going to do is I need to kill some does. And one of the spots that we set up in this remodel has a feeder up by the barn that if I shoot a doe, they will not run in the sanctuary. So if we have cool weather like we have this week where it's not, 90 degrees and I got to really, really struggle with the meat, if we have it in the 60s, I'll probably end up killing a couple does opening weekend.
Yeah. Well, I did make one decision this week regarding my hunting plans for this fall.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't even know if I've said it on the podcast before, but one desire, I guess, it's kind of a goal, but it's really not a goal. If it happens, it happens. If it don't, it don't. But one desire I've had is to kill one giant buck with a recurve. Well, I've got a recurve that I've actually shot some bucks with it way back in the day. I'm talking like, let's see, it would have been about 30 years ago.
Wow.
I hunted with it for 2 seasons, and I think I shot 3 bucks in those 2 seasons with this bow. But anyway, back in May, I broke this bow out and I started shooting it. And I was shooting it. I tried not to miss 2 days in a row. So I was shooting probably 2 out of every 3 days from May, June into July. Got into August, I slacked off a little bit because, to be honest, I wasn't getting any better. And I wasn't shooting good enough to take it to the woods. So I had a young man that I know had a bow for sale, a recurve for sale. The one I had was too heavy for me. It was 62 pounds, and when I was 30 years old, that was fine. But at 62 years old, that was just a little bit too much, and I think that's why I was shooting it so poor. And then this young man I know had one, a 45-pound recurve for sale, a real nice one, Black Widow, and he loaned it to me he wants to sell it, but he gave it to me to shoot for as long as I want. And so I got it home, and I shot it for a couple days. And I'll tell you what, I just cannot bring myself to take it to the woods this year because I'm not, and I know I'm going to have to shoot the deer close, but it's just not going to happen. So with just a month left until our season opens, I made the decision to use my compound this year, and I broke it out yesterday and shot it for the first time in a year. And what I was afraid of was after all those months of shooting that recurve, I'd pick up some bad habits, and that compound was going to be all new to me again.
Yeah.
But I got on it. Within the first few arrows, I was right back, shooting as good as I ever have. But I'm not going to buy that Black Widow bow. I think it's too short for me. I need a little bit longer bow. And I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where I can shoot good enough with a recurve to take it hunting or not. But I would like to kill one giant with a recurve one day.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Now, to make sure everybody understands, when you said you broke out your compound, you are still extremely loyal to the best bow you believe is ever made, and that's a Mathews Z9 that you keep ready at all times. If people remember last year, you're on the early release bow list from Mathews. So when they release their bow mid-November, you've usually had yours for a period of time, but last year the bow didn't show up on time. It was a little bit late. So I think, wasn't it the story that you took it out the same day you got it?
Yep.
So, but you keep that Z9 primed and ready at all times to just in case. But we actually auctioned your bow off for charity along with mine last year at Shipshewana. So are you going to just leave it as a game time decision when the new bow shows up and when it shows up and how good you shoot it?
Well, see, last year it showed up on October 9th. I don't know, there was some issue with the manufacturer. I don't remember what it was, but they didn't get them out as quick as they typically do. At least I didn't get mine. And
yeah.
But when I got it, I thought, well, I'd already been taking my Z9 to the woods and hunting with it, and it showed up, and I was torn of whether to even shoot it. But I thought, you know what, I owe it. Mathews has been so good to me over a long period of time, more than 2 decades now, probably pushing 25 years now. I thought, well, I owe it to him to at least get it out of the box and give it a shot. Well, I just, I've got that old sight from, you call it the 1950s. I just screwed that on the side of that bow. And when they send them to me, they're already set up. I mean, they've already got the rest on it. It's already got the D-loop for the release. Yeah. And they've tuned it. They've got all my info and what arrows I'm using, the weight and everything, and they've got the thing tuned when I get it. So that's huge.
You don't use a peep, so you don't even have to tie a peep in. So it's pretty seamless. You just got to sight in your sight.
Well, I put that side. All I did was screwed that side onto the side of that bow last year. I went out and I stood back at 20 yards, and I had no idea how it was going to shoot, and I dropped that first arrow right smack center in the bullseye and didn't even have to tweak my sight at all. And I don't know how many arrows I shot. I shot several arrows that day before I took it that afternoon hunting, and that was the evening that I shot Zacchaeus with it, the day it showed up. I literally had that bow in hand less than 10 hours, probably less than 8 hours before I shot that buck with it. And if I wouldn't have been shooting it good, I would have grabbed my Z9 and I would have went and I'd have slung some more arrows to get comfortable. and then I'd went hunting with it. But it shot so well that I took it to the woods. This year, I have no idea. I hope they get it to me before October 1st.
Yeah, but we'll be prepared either way. It's kind of a bad deal because we want to use our bows. Matthews is so gracious to us. We want to use our bows for raising money for Lester's feet, but it does put us in a little bit of a pickle when it comes around for the next season, but everything usually works out. So let's talk about the next couple days, because outside of the buck forecast and what you saw on the first camera pulls today, I'm sure you have a busy couple afternoons here where you are moving cameras because of that holiday weekend that we talk about so much. So let's talk about that before we go to our Asio break.
Yeah, so I've got, I would say probably about a quarter of my cameras, and I've got a bunch of them, so I got 55 of them out right now, and probably at least a dozen of those are going to get moved. Now, there's some that they're in spots where I just leave them from the time I put them up around the 4th of July until I take them down, in March. But there's others that I shift, those are ones that are in the summertime. They're where I'm typically finding bucks, in bachelor groups, and then I shift those to like fall areas where there's a lot more rutting activity than there is activity in the summer. So I've got about a dozen or so of those to move in the next, say 3 to 4 days. I'll get most of them moved, but I've got some cameras I haven't even checked yet, so I'm kind of anxious to get these all checked and all moved and set up. And got permission on a new property the other day. I put some cameras on. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there's rumored to be a giant buck in the neighborhood, but who knows?
It's funny because I got permission to hunt 2 permission properties here recently in Kentucky, and I know zero about them. One of them I've already put cameras on. The other one I'm going to make a run down Monday to hang cameras on it. So you can't turn down the opportunity to at least hang cameras. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? And it might be, I'm not going to go in. If I would have gotten permission, say in January, February, I would have gone in and scouted it, hung a camera just in case there was one there. But I really think that my strategy this time is to go in, hang a cell camera in, let it soak for a little bit, and pick my poison and just pack in a Novix tree stand and some ladder sticks and hunt the first time I go in. And it might be a long set, to go in earlier in the afternoon in case I have to trim a shooting lane or something. But I think that's going to be the strategy on these if there ends up being a shooter in there.
Yeah, I hadn't even stepped foot on this property until the other day. Well, I put my cameras up and I was looking for tree stand locations while I was doing that. I got 2 trees picked out that I can hunt just about any wind direction from one of those 2 trees.
That's
so good. If I get something on camera there, which I have not yet, that I want to shoot, I know exactly where I'm going. I don't have to go in there and stomp around looking for the tree I'm going to hang my stand in. I know exactly where I'm going now. It's just a matter of is something going to show up that I want to shoot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's take a quick break before the buck forecast for 2025 season and listen to a spot from Asio. If you are listening to the podcast on Sunday or Monday, make sure you're checking out the Labor Day sale that Asio has, I believe, 30% off, at least on some items. So it's one of the biggest sales of the year that you guys can go on their website. It's all over social media, but make sure you go to their website, Asio Gear, and check that out and save money this Labor Day. So we'll be right back.
Asio Gear was forged by apex predators. Our 2 camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetail's range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters, from our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. Asio Gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit Asio Gear and use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
Okay, Don, first of all, for the new listeners, let's talk about the origin, or kind of why we started the buck forecast and your idea behind it, and kind of if you can even remember the ups and downs, because some years you've predicted really good, but think back since we've done this show and we've done this buck forecast, give the new folks a kind of a rundown of what this is.
Yeah, so as I stated a little bit ago, I've got dozens of cameras out. I've got them in multiple states. I've got them in multiple counties in multiple states. And I feel that by the end of the summer, I've got a pretty good handle on what the forecast is as far as, buck harvest for that fall. And I'm not talking numbers. I'm talking, it was the antler growth average, better than average, worse than average, whatever. If we look back a little bit, in 23, we had a poor antler growing season, and the buck I shot that fall was Babe. He was 6 years old when I shot him, but he actually lost about 5 inches from the previous year, and I'm sure it was due to the growing season that year. It was just terrible. And actually, it was one of the worst ever that I'd ever seen, and I predicted that just based on what the cameras were showing me and the weather patterns I'd watched throughout that summer. But then in 24, we had, I think 24 was the best antler growing season I've ever seen. And it started with a mild winter, and then the mild winter was followed by an early spring. And then we got pretty steady rains throughout the spring and summer months. And the bucks just, it was just fantastic conditions for the bucks to grow their antlers. This year was a little different, though. This year, the winter hung on, and we had a late spring. I know the crops in my area, the majority of them got planted about 30 days later than average. There was a window of about 2 days where some of the fields were dry enough to plant, which would have been the normal planting time. And then after those 2 days, it started raining, and for about the next month, that just continued, and the crops were not put in the field. So we had, and also, to back up a little bit, the last winter, I wouldn't call it a rough winter, but it was probably the roughest we've had in several years. I can't even remember the last winter I had touched a snow shovel, and it'd been probably at least 4 winters that I did not even touch a snow shovel. And then last winter, I know we had one storm where I spent 4 hours on a skid loader moving snow, not to mention all the shoveling I did as well, and that was just one of a handful of storms that come through. And again, it wasn't a terrible winter, but it was a lot worse than we had been having. And then we had the late spring, and we was getting really timely rains up to about mid-July. Then in mid-July, at least here at my place, the rain shut off, and it's been almost non-existent for a month and a half now. And we are super dry. We could use 2 or 3 inches if it'd come right, and not come in like an hour. But if we get 2 or 3 inches over 24 hours, that would just make my day. We need it bad. The corn crop's finished. It wouldn't help the corn at all, but the soybeans, especially the later maturing soybeans like the Gen 2 soybeans, they've got the pods on now, and 2 or 3 inches of rain would really fill those pods out. So that's what I'm hoping for there. But as I'm running these trail cameras all summer, and I'm looking at bucks that I know, and did they put on inches from a year ago, or did they go backwards and lose inches? How did the bucks, especially one thing I really like to look at is what does a buck do from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4? That's a couple of, if a buck's going to be a giant, you're going to know it when he's 3 years old. If he's ever going to be a giant later on, you're going to know it by the time he's 3, almost every time. And so I'm looking at that jump from 2 to 3, but also from 3 to 4. A lot of bucks make a jump there too, and that's how I kind of gauge things. So it's getting kind of more difficult to put this into words. Each year goes by because things that change within the hunting regulations. So it used to be in the state of Illinois, if I could get a buck past gun season when he was a 3.5-year-old, the odds of that buck surviving to 5 and 6 was really, really good. He was really vulnerable as a 3-year-old, but if we got him through gun season as a 3-year-old, The odds were really good that he was going to hit 5 or 6 years old. So that's no longer the case. So I've got to kind of factor in some other things, the state of the current state of the deer herd and the statewide management at the same time as I think about this. And so to get to the point, I think in 25, I think there's going to be and there's always going to be some giants, because there's always going to be those situations where a buck he's got the genetics and he's got the age, and even if it's not ideal growing conditions, he's got enough going for him that he's going to be a giant. So there's always going to be those giants, but I'm talking, on a large number of them. I would rank this year slightly better than average. I do think that even though we had some things going against us, I've seen a lot of bucks make nice jumps in antler score that I've been watching. I don't think it's as good as last year. Last year, I would have put really good. Like I said, one of the best growing seasons ever. This year, slightly below that, but still a little bit better than average. And I think there's going to be a lot of bucks. A lot of hunters are going to shoot bucks in that 140 to 160 range. There's just going to be a lot of 3 and 4 year old bucks that had enough going for them and had enough good nutrition throughout the antler growing season that there's going to be a lot of 140s to 160s killed. And I could probably even lower that, say 130 to 160.
Right.
Top end bucks, they're rare, and it's got more to do with the statewide management and game regulations than it does anything else. In situations, where there's a large sanctuary area where maybe hunting's not allowed, or there's a situation where bucks do reach older age classes, there's going to be some giants killed. The growing season was better than average, so there's going to be some giants killed too. But there's going to be a lot of those 140 to 160 type bucks.
Interesting. Do you think that basically what it is what it is, as far as, can anything change that opinion this late in the year? Or are we pretty much locked in on what it is?
Well, the thing that could really change that, and it's going to change it in places like southeastern Ohio, EHD. EHD has just been devastating in that area. I just get report after report and picture after picture of dead deer. Those folks, I feel for them, because it's not going to be good down there. And there's also isolated pockets in other areas. I've heard of southern Indiana, south of me around the Effingham, Altamont area in Illinois. I've heard of some deer being found, and I'm sure there's other pockets too, but that southern Ohio has been the place this year that's just been ravaged by EHD, and that's the wild card now, and hopefully most of our listeners aren't having to deal with that.
My biggest fear is it's already devastating, but when we've had EHD elsewhere, it hadn't even started yet. Like last year on my farm in Illinois, it didn't set in until the first week of September is when EHD set in there. So in 2012, it wasn't until September. So my biggest fear is it's been devastating already for southeastern Ohio, but historically we're creeping up on when the devastation has happened in the past. So we don't know how widespread this is going to end up being, or if it affects anyone else.
Well, a couple of notes from this season that were really strange. One is the EHD outbreak started a full month to 6 weeks earlier than typical. I was hearing reports and seeing photos of dead EHD deer over a month ahead of when you would expect to first start to see them. So that's a really bad sign for this year. The other thing is, I've been chasing these deer in my neighborhood for a long time, and I've got things down pretty pat, or at least I thought I did. I know where these bucks are going to go summer. I know when they're going to return to their fall ranges and things like that. But this year, the buck patterns were just totally different than anything I've seen in the past. And people have heard me say on this podcast many times that bucks don't summer on my farm. I had more bucks on my farm this summer than I have ever had. And where I would typically put cameras and catch bachelor groups, I would catch occasional bucks there, or maybe 1 or 2 or 3 bucks, but the bigger bachelor groups just were not there. And the only thing I can figure that changed in my neighborhood is I shot all them does last year. Typically my farm is just loaded up with does and fawns in the summer, and there's still some here, but not to the numbers that there has been in the past. And I don't know if that affected the bucks or what, but I'm telling you, I've been getting pictures of bucks on this farm. I probably got more pictures of bucks on this farm this summer than for the previous 8 or 10 summers combined. That's how much different it was this year. But it's not just my neighborhood either. There's other places where I've had cameras on properties that are many miles from my place where the buck patterns are just totally different. The bachelor groups didn't seem to stay tight to one food source. They seem to wander more than I've ever seen them wander in the past. And they do that some anyway, but not to the degree that I've seen it this year. Those bucks are just wandering everywhere, and it's not like you could find a good bachelor group and put a couple cameras out and count on those deer coming by those cameras 3 times a week. And you might get their picture and then not get their picture again for 2 or 3 weeks. And then it's only for a day, and then boom, they're gone again. And I also seen situation where individual bucks, I was getting their pictures 2 miles apart. So I know they was wandering at least 2 miles, and they just seemed to wander over a much wider area this summer than I've ever seen in the past.
What's the chances, Don, this is a crazy idea, that after the rut, the buck's testosterone drops so rapidly and so far that the mature does in areas like your farm actually push the bucks off to their summer range? And with you killing that many does, they just never felt that pressure for them to leave, to get off. Do you think it's just the normal cycle of God's creation and how it works that they leave that best habitat and go off by themselves? Or do you think there's another level of maternal aggression that says, time's up, boy, get out of here?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer. I mean, I've never seen it like this before. If it would have happened for the last 10 years, I would probably have enough observation to come up with some theory. But I really don't even have a theory at this point. I do know that based on years of experience that typically those bucks start dispersing off of my property about the 1st of March. And a lot of them will take their antlers with them. I mean, they haven't even shed yet. And there's bucks that'll winter here, and they were here all fall and all through the winter, and then boom, they leave before they ever shed their antlers, and I never find their antlers. So I really don't have an explanation to why this might have happened this way this year. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens next year, if they stick with this wandering pattern or if they become, more homebody types or tied to food sources a lot tighter than like they were in the past.
When you think you have it all figured out, you're more confused than ever.
Well, the older I get, the more I realize how little I know personally about deer. I mean, I think I know a lot. When I was younger, I thought I knew it all. And the older I get, the more I realize I don't know much at all. So I just keep learning. I think that's what makes it so interesting is at this point, I know I'm never going to know it all. And I know I can continue to learn something every season. And I can continue to learn from other people. I mean, that's one thing I love about consulting is the people that I meet are serious deer hunters. And it's not like I'm dealing with guys that have been hunting for 2 or 3 years. These guys have been doing it, and they're super serious about it. And they will teach me things, or they will say something that'll make me see something from a totally different perspective than I'd ever seen it before. And the consulting season, I end the consulting season with all kinds of ideas in my head and ideas on what I can do on my property. And I'm sure I'm helping my clients, but they don't realize that a lot of times they're pushing me to be better as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A lot of the ideas I've put in place on my farm was through experiences of consulting. And hopefully some of the ideas I have on my farm also my consultants can use. So it's a fun experience to feed off of each other, I guess, is the best place. So let's transition to the 360 Blinds Higgins hot seat question. And I'm going to change it up a little bit this week again with a different type question. In the last 2 days, as I've been driving back and forth to Illinois and back, I've gotten 5 phone calls from friends of ours or podcast listeners from Southeast Ohio with the EHD setting in. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you, because, you know, their morale, I mean, they're just devastated. You and I have been through it on several occasions. You know, it's just the first time that these people over in Ohio have really experienced anything like this. And we don't know who else is going to have to, you know, get it this year. But I look at the folks along the Ohio River on the Indiana side, you know, in Southeast Indiana, they've been through it more times than anybody, I think. I think it hits there, it seems like, every other year. But the tone of these questions are, number one, what can I do now as they're finding dead deer, all the way to, should I sell my farm? You know, the despair of what's there. So I guess my question to put you on the spot is, what is the Don Higgins advice for those folks that are in ground zero right now? You know, what should they do? What can they do? And how can they keep their chin up a little bit for a long-term play? Because, I mean, the guy that called me on the way home today, he was wanting to go ahead and sell his farm now. I mean, he was throwing the cards in. So give some advice to those people at ground zero.
Well, it's a tough situation, and what makes it really tough is that you're not going to get over the hump in one season. So, you know, we wait all year for the fall, and then you have something like this happen. It's like having the rug pulled out from under you, but it's so bad that it's not just pulled out from under you for this season, it's pulled out from under you for 2, 3, 4 seasons, depending on what your goals are. You just got to stick with the plan, and you know what I learned in 2012 was you got to do the right thing no matter what your state game agency does. In 2012, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources did absolutely nothing after the devastating outbreak, and they didn't cut back on antlerless seasons. They did nothing, but I did. I personally did. So up until 2012, I was shooting does on my property. I was trying to shoot 2 does for every buck that was shot here. So if we'd shoot 2 bucks, we'd try to shoot 4 does. And in 2012, I absolutely stopped shooting does, period. And I didn't shoot does for a decade. It was like 2022 before I shot the next doe. So like for 10 years, I did not shoot a doe on this farm. And I think the big thing is, you can't worry about what the other guy's doing. You can't worry about what the state's doing. If you really care, you got to do what you know is the right thing. And especially when it comes to your bucks. So the trophy buck that you was going to be after, whatever he was, if he was 130 inch or if he was 230 inch, doesn't matter. He's gone now. Don't lower the standards to the point where you're shooting future giants. And I think that's what happens on a lot of properties. They lose their older mature bucks, so what do? They just start shooting the 2 and 3 year olds, and maybe even yearlings in some cases. There's no law that says you have to kill a buck every year. You know, as hunters, we should be judged more by what we choose not to shoot than by what we do shoot. And being a responsible steward of the resource, sometimes you don't have to harvest a deer. Some seasons you can start your habitat projects early. You can use this opportunity to plant things that the deer might normally devastate. You know, tree plantings, for example, evergreen. I know white pines, the deer just hammer those little seedlings. Maybe if your herd has totally been wiped out, you spend the next couple of years just making your property the best habitat it can possibly be. And don't shoot a deer. Go on a hunting trip out of state or somewhere else and you know, shoot your deer, but use your time on your property to make it better than it was. Speaking of EHD, you know, I've been thinking about implementing some water holes on my farm, a couple different places, which would basically enhance stand sites that are right there. But the more I think about it, I don't have much of a problem with EHD. I did in 2012. That was the only year. And I think it's because of the isolation of my farm surrounded by these big ag fields. I think that lends itself to kind of the isolation away from other deer property has helped me from.
You have no stagnant water on your place. All of your water is moving.
So I don't know. I've just about convinced myself not to put a water hole out. And I know they've got some things to treat the water now, but how effective is it really? And maybe it works great. I'm not bashing the product because I don't know.
Right.
But it's a chance. Do I want to take that chance? So, you know, some of these guys that are getting hit, maybe you've got some water holes on your property where stagnant water sits that you need to drain them. Get a backhoe or a mini hoe in there and drain those water sources, and where these midge gnats are living that's carrying the EHD. I would use the opportunity to improve your property, make it the best it can be, and while the deer herd is rebounding, when it finally does bounce back 100%, your property is now the best property in the neighborhood.
All right, so I got 2 additional questions for you on this topic, and I'm going to ask both of them, and you can choose which one you want to answer first and which one you want to think about more. The first one is, there's a lot of people encouraging you to report your dead deer to the local DNR. So if it was you on your property, are you getting the government involved on how many deer are dead on your property and reporting it? The second question is, if you're got a lot of bad smells and you're not getting anything on trail cameras, are you going to go ahead and walk your property looking for deadheads, or are you just going to sit back and wait? 2 questions.
Well, I am probably not going to walk my property. I would wait until shed antler season and pick up what I find then. I'm not going to. The security of my sanctuary.
If they're dead now, they're dead in February.
Exactly. It's not like I'm going to run them off. It's not like that skull is going to get up and run away. I'm not going to go on my property. I think the human intrusion factor is so important that I'm not going to go do it. As far as reporting anything, there's absolutely no way I'm reporting anything to the stinking government. I mean, folks, I live in Illinois. Illinois has proven to me, the DNR has proven to me, they're not going to do anything to help the deer herd. They're managing numbers. That's all they're doing is they're managing numbers, and they're trying to manage people. They're not managing the deer. And you know, the crazy thing is, you bring this interesting topic up because just this afternoon, one of my consulting clients sent me a video. It was Ted Nugent on Rogan and talking about CWD. And the consulting client wanted to know if I agreed with what Ted Nugent was saying. And, you know, he was basically saying word for word what I've been saying for a long time, and that it's government bureaucrats is the problem, and more deer get killed by cars and EHD than they ever get killed with CWD. But anyway, it got me to thinking, I don't know if you remember this, Terry, but way back in the day, I was probably the first person to tell people not to report sick deer, because the Illinois DNR was coming in with sharpshooters and wiping out, if there was one CWD deer, they was coming in and wiping them all out for 5 years.
Right.
And I was telling people, don't call them. Because
Right.
you call them, all you're doing is you're just ruining your whole hunting property for probably the next decade plus.
Yeah.
Don't. And man, I got raked over the coals. People said I was a radical and this and that. And now we got a lot of people saying, don't report your dead deer.
Yep.
And I'm kind of proud of the fact that I think I was the first one. I never heard anybody say it when I said it. But Ted Nugent, he was right on the money whenever he was talking to Rogan about CWD. And I'm not reporting anything.
All right. Well, thanks to T. Blinds for the Higgins hot seat, and maybe some advice to all of you guys. And look, even though we've been through it, it's not like we're minimizing the experience you've gone through. It's the most sickening and, gut-wrenching experience that you can have. You either buy these properties and spend all this money and time to get set up, and then it gets pulled out from underneath of you. So we totally get it, but ride it out and play the long game. That's the best advice we can give you.
Yep.
All right.
Get your habitat work done.
and come back with the Midwest Land Group listener-submitted questions for this week. We'll be right back.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
All right, our first question comes from Russ Kazda from Oak Forest, Illinois. It says, Don and Terry, thank you for the excellent content you continue to provide. My question is about hunting rut stands. Do you think it's possible that there is a stand location that is just mediocre or even bad at all times of the season except during the rut? I have a few stand sites that I leave a camera up nearby almost all year round, and for the most part, they have very little action other than a stray doe or two or small buck, but there always seems to be a large mature buck in the area that I see from the stand each year during the rut. And I was curious as if this is a common scenario. My trail camera pictures are very disappointing until about the end of October when I start to see some nighttime pictures of nice bucks. If I rely any time the trail camera data from any time outside of the rut, the spot would seem to be a dead zone. I would love to know your thoughts about this. Thanks. Russ, that's very common. You know, what happens is during the rut, the bucks just increase their range. They don't go outside their range so much. I'm not saying it never happens, but for the most part, they just are utilizing their entire home range in search of hot does. So the buck is familiar with the area. He's not coming through not knowing what's there. He's very familiar with the area. But outside of the rut, he's got a better place where he feels safe and where there's prime food sources. And once the rut heats up, he's just covering more ground. So there's a lot of stands like that you know, aren't that good until the rut heats up and the bucks start covering more territory. So the rut funnels that Bobby Worthington talks about, you know, if you set one of those in October, you may sit there every day for the whole month, daylight to dark, and not see a decent buck. But shoot, then when the rut heats up, here comes a giant. So very, very common.
Okay, good question. I'm interested in how you're going to answer this one.
The next one comes from Jerry McCormick from Tyler, Texas. Says, thank you for taking the time to produce this podcast each week. It is, without a doubt, the best whitetail podcast available. My question is for Don and concerns his captive deer experience. With all the hate that you take in regards to captive deer, do you regret ever having captive deer? It seems like a lot of the haters use this to try to discredit you without regard to the fact that you have always been honest and forthcoming about it. Just thinking that you might wish you had never had them. Thank you. Well, Jerry, the reason I picked your question is because somebody asked me that recently, and I had to think about my answer a little bit, but then when I seen your question come through, I knew the answer. I do not regret having the captive deer, and if I had to do it over again, I would probably have done it. The haters, for one thing, the primary haters are basing their accusations on total lies. So if they weren't, you know, lying about me turning loose captive deer or whatever, they'd be lying about something else. I don't see that me not having captive deer would have kept the haters silent. I think they would still be there. You know, when someone's so mentally ill that they've got to use lies to try to destroy someone, they're going to find some way to do it. But I learned so much from those captive deer. There is no doubt that those captive deer made me a better deer hunter. I mean, I learned about nutrition, I learned about genetics, just vocalizations of these deer, you know, the breeding cycle, social hierarchy, things like that, just all kinds of things that there would be no way for anyone to learn with a wild herd. Being there with those deer, knowing the individual deer, and observing them every single day, it was just a learning experience that there's no way you could duplicate it with a wild herd. So I don't regret having them. What I regret is that some people are so mentally ill that they've got to make things up about people. And that's the world we live in, so it is what it is.
You gonna let me say something on this one?
I hope you do.
Well, I think if you and I have a weakness, it's that we feel like we have to defend every comment that's ever said bad about us. And it's just kind of our upbringing about how we fight and we take up for the people and the things that we love and we care about. And, sometimes that comes through on the show and we maybe sound like we're venting a little bit more than we should. But I've really thought about this the last couple weeks, and it really comes down to an integrity issue of the people that's spreading this stuff. And when you look at the quality of character and the people that is involved in it, that tells you enough about the story. I think I'm trying to do a much better job of not worrying about it. Like you just said, the learning and the pluses that you got out of this scenario of having captive deer far outweigh the 3 or 4 people that have accusations against it, even though their families also had captive deer, even though they accuse you of it. It's just, it becomes a statement of character of the people that just have so much bitterness and hate in their life that they can't let things go. So I agree with you. I think that what it prepared you to do in your hunting career, but most of all, helping your land consulting clients and the listeners of this podcast with different physiological and social aspects of deer that you would not have known otherwise far outweigh the aggravation that we get for being in the public eye every now and then. So I think it's a price worth paying.
Yeah, I'm not going to dwell on it too much. It's part of it.
Yeah, part of it. All right, let's get the next one.
The next one comes from Anonymous, somewhere in Indiana. It says, Don and Terry.
Anonymous.
So I recently watched a video of a popular TV hunter that came out on YouTube, and it was a walkthrough of his whitetail trophy room. I won't name the guy, but he has a pretty unique name and has recently openly admitted to basically paying a fee to hunt a big deer or a finder's fee for someone who finds him a big one. This guy had an absolute pile of giant deer, basically so many it just seems unrealistic he could have killed them all. Do you believe this guy is just on a completely different level than anyone else, or how is he pulling this off? I know guys who eat, sleep, and breathe white-tailed deer, and they are nowhere near the crazy number of giants this guy has. I am guessing that there were 8 to 10 bucks over 200 inches from what I could tell in the video, not to mention walls full of other giant bucks. I was just curious your opinion if there are guys like this one out there that are on an elite level, or is it just a money game where they are basically paying for these big deer? Thanks. Well, Anonymous, I'm not going to get into bashing any one particular person. And so if someone that's listening thinks they know who you're talking about, this is not directed at any one particular person. I'm going to direct it at the whole trophy hunting community, if you will. And there are guys that are definitely on a more elite level than a lot of the rest of the people. And I'm not saying one guy is more elite than everybody else. There's like a group of elite hunters. When it comes to guys that are just tagging giant after giant after giant, and when I say giant, I'm talking 200-inch plus deer. I'm not talking 170. So I think today I probably have as much free time to chase big deer, and probably not, I don't think I have the financial resources as some people, but I think I've got enough financial resources to chase them one-on-one. When I say one-on-one, that's me. So, I said earlier in this podcast, I've got dozens of trail cameras out in multiple states. I'm looking for giant deer as hard as anybody is. Now, what I don't think can happen, I don't think that one guy can go out and shoot 200-inch deer year after year after year without some outside assistance. And it doesn't matter how much money the guy's got. He could have all the money in the world, and those deer are just so rare. You could have 300 trail cameras and do nothing all summer long but drive around in your truck getting permission, releasing properties, putting out trail cameras, checking trail cameras. You just can't do it on your own. The big thing is that there's other people helping find these deer. One person just cannot find that many big deer on their own. So there's some help coming from some outside sources. The other thing I want to say is that I know for absolute certain that there are at least 2 big names in the industry, and I wouldn't say they are the biggest names, but they are some big names in the industry that have shot captive deer in the pen. And I'm not saying they shot every one of their deer in the pen, but I know for a fact that they have shot. I mean, I know exactly where they did it at. It's not secondhand knowledge. I know the owner of the place where they did it, so I know it happens. Again, I'm not saying they shot all their deer that way, but I know they've shot some that way. And that's their business. It's not for me to try to tear someone down. I've got people trying to tear me down every day, and I don't want to be that way. We each got to live with the decisions we've made. I try to lay out as honest as I can on my property. I've had people here with my classes and this and that. Love what I do and love sharing with others, and I love learning from others. But I just want you to realize that, yeah, there is an elite group of deer hunters that are going to kill a lot more big deer than the other guys that are trying to. And the other guys that are trying to, they're going to kill some as well. But the guys that are doing it year after year after year, they're not finding them on their own. And whether they're paying people a finder's fee, going and once they hear about a deer, they're going and paying a lot of money to lease the farm to get on it. I don't know what all is going on there. I'm sure there's some of that does go on. But that's kind of my take on that whole situation.
Okay. I'm not commenting on that one. I think you answered it fine. There's good people in this industry and crooks in this industry. It is like everything else.
The next one comes from Emmanuel Gingrich from Macon, Missouri. It says, Dear Don and Terry, your podcast is awesome. I listen to it every episode. My question is, how long can deadly dozen be planted before the seeds defecate? I'm not sure that's the right word there, but I think it should be before the seeds decay.
I think the spell check on AI when I was putting them in changed it to defecate. It looks like deadly dozen seeds took a code brown, according to this question.
Let me start over with that paragraph. My question is, how long can deadly dozen be planted before the seeds decay? In such dry conditions as we are now, here in mid-Missouri, we're pretty dry. I was also wondering how Asio gear compares to other camo brands such as Sitka and Scentlock, etc. I haven't heard this discussed on this podcast. I look forward to hearing your answer and hope you can find your target buck this fall. Well, Emmanuel, as far as the seed question, I picked your question because that's a question that we're getting a lot right now due to the weather conditions. If I plant my seed now and we don't get rain for 2 weeks, is the seed still going to be good? And, it's going to lose very little germ. That seed is viable and can handle more than you think it can. There's some native grass seeds that can lay dormant in the soil for 50 years, and they're going through 50 years of summers and winters and heavy rains and droughts and everything else, and then boom, when the conditions are right, that seed germinates and grows. So I don't think it's really anything to be worried about. I mean, lack of moisture is definitely something to be worried about, but as far as your seed going bad when you finally do get the moisture, that's not going to happen, or very little. You may lose a little bit of germ or germination percentage, but very little. I wouldn't worry about that whatsoever.
You'll lose more to birds than you will bad germ.
I agree. Absolutely. And your question about Asio. So before I started wearing Asio a few years ago, I wore a couple of other brands, a very high dollar brand. I'm not going to mention because I'm not here to bash other products, and because in fact it was a very good product as far as keeping me warm and everything. What I like better about Asio, well, there's three things I like better about Asio than the other really high dollar brand. First of all, Asio keeps me just as warm as that brand did. I like Asio's pattern a lot better. I think it blends into the trees that I'm hunting out of way better than the other brand did. It's a lot quieter. The Asio fabric, Joe Miles knew exactly what he was doing. You got to stay quiet when it comes to, you can't be having your sleeve brush against your chest when you're drawing your bow and make a scratching sound. It's got to be quiet, and Joe's handled that. The other thing is all the little, I don't know what you would call it, accessories or options or whatever that Joe has thought of with his gear. I mean, this was designed by a world-class deer hunter that spent thousands and thousands of hours in trees, and he thought of everything. That's the big thing. I fully believe in my heart that Asio can stand right there with the biggest name brands, the most expensive clothing out there, and there are advantages with Asio. Namely, I like the camo pattern for tree stands, and I like how quiet it is and all those little extras that Joe thought of.
Especially for bow tree stand hunters.
Yep.
You know, like the cuffs that go down and have a place for your release, the collar that has an angle cut on it so your bowstring doesn't get caught on your collar, a long tail on your jacket so you don't have plumber butt while you're sitting in the stand, different material on the back so it doesn't make noise on the tree. As it relates to whitetail hunters, there's probably niche, mission-specific stuff to go out and crawl around the rocks in the Rocky Mountains, you know. But for tree stand hunters, we've just, and we bought it. We bought our whole first set before we partnered with them just to make sure that we liked it. But yeah, I agree. I think from those three characteristics, it's hands down. But here's the thing. It's cheaper than those other brands because there's no retail middle person. It's not because it's a cheaper made garment. Joe is consumer direct, so he's not that retailer like Bass Pro or Cabela's or whoever you're buying your stuff through is not an intermediate markup to hold that inventory. So he's doing it direct to save you money. And the only risk is you don't get to go in a dressing room and try it on, but he has a free return policy. If it doesn't fit, you just swap it out. He's definitely done a fantastic job and continues to grow the line. There's new rain gear out. He's got tall sizes. So a lot of the stuff that people's been asking for over and over. I just got a shipment in that I bought. There was some pieces that I needed that to fill out what I wanted for the season. I just got a box while I was gone here the last 2 days, but I haven't talked about this on the podcast, I don't think, but I suffer from low blood pressure. And I know you get cold really easy too. And when most people are really comfortable with maybe like a base layer and the midweight, I'm already in the heavier stuff because I get so cold. When you all see the video of me when I shot King David on November 16th, I mean, I'm got like 5 layers on in the winter parka and it wasn't that cold. So, yeah, I stay warm.
You know, I've wore all different kinds of camo in the last 50 years, and I've had some good stuff, and I had some junk, and I had some of the high dollar stuff that, you know, he's talking about. That high dollar stuff is good stuff. It kept me warm, and it cut the wind. That was the thing that was most impressive to me is the way it cut the wind. You just didn't get that wind coming through the fabric. But with Asio, you got the same thing, plus all those other extras that we talked about.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're going to save question 5 for next week, and we got Wes Delks doing Sunday night prayer time. I do want to tell people a quick thing before we sign off, even though we're a little bit over an hour. I was talking to Mike Mitchell this week, and we've talked openly about needing rain to push those pods out. We're going to, Don and I, be doing some testing on Chasing Giants TV, and whatever the results are, the results are. But we're actually going to do some tests. And if you guys want to do your own test, if you have some of this laying over, we want to see if on these soybean fields, if we missed a certain test strip of soybeans with Mike's Mighty Micros, if it will pull enough nutrients out of that application to push those beans out in the pod. So we're going to be doing this on Chasing Giants TV in the coming weeks. if you want to follow along. But I will tell you one thing. Those of you who are planning your fall plots right now and don't have rain for the next week or two, we know for a fact that we're going to have about 3 weeks of lack of growing season for these fall plots. We recommend, trust us, when these things finally get rain and they germinate and they get that green leaf matter, get some Mike's Mighty Micros and spray your fall plots after they get up a little bit and get that shot to them to put on more tonnage, because we're going to be losing some growing time this September because of the lack of rain. But you got to wait till it actually germinates and they get up a little bit. But that's a good way to catch up not only nutrients, but also some tonnage in our fall plots, right?
Yep. Great idea.
All right. That's all I got. You can close us out with any comments you got.
I've got one prayer request, and I'm asking all the listeners to pray for this gentleman, Jason Beachy, who owns JB's Feed in Ohio. That's where you had the seminar, Terry, last winter, and filled in for me when I was sick, and I was there, I think it was in June. Jason got some bad health news this week, and he's facing a battle that he's going to need all our prayers. So, Jason Beachy, please put him on your prayer list.
We need to add a second one. I just remembered. Brent Henderson is having open heart surgery this week. So he went in for a heart cath and they weren't able to do what they wanted. So they're cracking him open this week. So his entire fall is now going to be in recovery from open heart surgery.
So let's remember Brent and Jason both in our prayers. Yeah. God bless everyone. See you next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Asio Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Good morning, Chasing Giants family. The air is crisp and cool this morning. Checked my cell cameras and got a couple hard-horn bucks. I'm fired up for the beginning of deer season. It is almost here. You know, when I was a kid, my family used to make homemade ice cream when all our cousins would get together. And we'd pull that container out of ice cream, and in the bottom of that wooden bucket was a slurry of ice and cold water and salt. And all of the cousins, we would put our foot in that freezing water and see who would take their foot out the longest. And since that day, I've actually lost 3 toenails from competing in that with my cousins. And it sounds a little crazy, but mental toughness is a little crazy. And I wanted to bring to your attention a new race that's going on. Is you've heard of marathons, 26-mile runs. You might have even heard of ultra runs. Some of these ultra runs are 100-mile races. But there's a new, for those that are mentally tough, there's a new race that's going on called Last Man Standing races. And this June, Phil Gore, on June 26th, set the record for the longest last man standing race. It took place in Dead Cow Gully, Australia. Just the location sounds like a place where only the mentally tough would go. But a last man standing race is essentially a set amount of miles that you have to complete each hour. And at the top of every hour, you go again, and you got to complete that certain set of miles. And if you do in the allotted time, you can go again. And Phil Gore, this June, in 119 hours, ran 495 miles. That is absolutely incredible. Not only the physical fitness, but the mental toughness that has to be combined to achieve something like that is mind-blowing. There's another ultra runner that I just recently listened to by the name of Chris Wright, and he does other endurance activities. For example, he just attempted a 1,000-mile kayak paddle with another SEAL team member that was actually handicapped, paralyzed, and they didn't complete the 1,000-mile paddle. But Chris's advice was that he was setting short-term goals in his mind as well as on his watch of, I can go another 10 miles. I can go another 10 miles, because that's what he knew he could accomplish. And my encouragement to you is that in the races that we're running, whether it be in business, whether it be in your spiritual life, whether it be in deer hunting, to set short-term goals and stacking those wins for long-term success. And maybe your goal spiritually might be to share your faith with somebody for the first time this deer season. Find another deer hunter and share your faith with them and tell them what Jesus means to you. On a deer hunting perspective, maybe your goal is to plant your first food plot or to kill a 120-inch buck. I don't know what your goal might be, but I've got a long-term goal of I want to kill a 200-inch deer someday. And that's not going to happen this year, but I want to keep setting short-term goals. And in the long run, I know I'm going to reach that goal someday. Just close with me in prayer. But I want to share a couple verses with you. Zechariah 4:10 says, "Do not despise the day of small beginnings." And whatever those short-term goals might be, don't despise those days. Those are days that are meant to encourage you and build you up to reach those long-term goals. And Philippians 3:14 says, "Press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called you in Christ Jesus." Keep pressing on. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings you've given us. I pray that the Chasing Giants listeners would set short-term goals, and you would give them the strength, the mental toughness to keep pressing on, to keep going forward in whatever battles, whatever races that they're fighting in. And we would stack those short-term successes, and there might be setbacks, but to keep pressing on to the ultimate goal, which is you, Father, which is you in eternity in Christ Jesus. So thank you for the Chasing Giants family and deer season coming up. Just keep us safe and help us to stack some wins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Have a great week. Blessings.